When the sun slipped behind the last crooked rooftops of a medieval city, something strange happened. The streets did not glow with lamps, voices did not grow louder, and life did not begin its second shift as it does today. Instead, the city seemed to exhale, and then fall into a deep, uneasy quiet. Doors were barred. Windows went dark. Footsteps faded. It was as if the city itself had decided to sleep, or pretend to sleep, until morning. Tonight, let yourself drift back into that darkness, and listen closely to why medieval cities fell silent after sunset. When the light disappeared. Imagine standing at the edge of a medieval city just as dusk arrives. The sky is no longer blue, but not yet black, washed in soft gray and fading amber. The sun sinks low behind distant hills or forests, and its last light catches on stone walls, church towers, and uneven roofs. For a moment, everything seems calm, almost peaceful. Then the light begins to fail. In the medieval world, darkness was not merely the absence of sunlight. Darkness was a condition, heavy, uncertain, and full of risk. There were no electric lamps waiting to flicker on. No glowing shop windows. No headlights slicing through the night. When the sun went down, visibility collapsed quickly, like a curtain dropping across the stage of daily life. Inside the city, people felt this change immediately. A market that only moments ago was full of voices began to thin. Merchants packed away their goods with practiced speed. Baskets were lifted, cloth covers folded, wooden stalls dismantled. The cheerful bargaining of the afternoon gave way to short, urgent exchanges. Time mattered now. Candles and oil lamps existed, but they were precious. Wax was expensive, often reserved for churches, monasteries, and wealthy households. Tallow candles, made from animal fat, burned with a weak, smoky flame and an unpleasant smell. They were not something you wasted to keep streets bright. Even inside homes, light was rationed carefully. As the sun lowered, shadows stretched across the narrow streets. Medieval cities were not built for light. Streets twisted and turned, often barely wide enough for two carts to pass. Upper floors of houses leaned outward, blocking what little sky remained visible. Stone absorbed the day's warmth but offered nothing in return once night fell. People knew this rhythm intimately. The day was for movement, trade, and work. The night belonged to stillness, and to dangers best avoided. City bells often marked this transition. In many towns, a curfew bell rang at sunset or shortly after. Its sound rolled through the streets, echoing off stone walls and timbered houses. This bell was not symbolic. It was a command. Fires were to be banked. Doors were to be closed. Anyone without a good reason to be outside should already be on their way home. The silence that followed was not immediate, but it was deliberate. One by one, sounds faded. The last cart rattled over cobblestones. The final group of workers passed through a gate before it was shut and barred. Laughter from taverns softened, then moved indoors, muffled by thick walls. For medieval people, night was not empty time. It was dangerous time. Crime thrived in darkness. Without light, faces vanished into shadow. A stranger could become anyone, or no one at all. Thieves knew the narrow alleys better than most honest citizens. Assault, robbery, and quiet murder were real fears, whispered about but rarely written down. And crime was not the only threat. Fires were a constant nightmare. A single overturned lamp or neglected hearth could destroy entire neighborhoods built from wood and thatch. By limiting nighttime activity, cities reduced the chances of catastrophe while everyone slept. Outside the city walls, danger felt even closer. Wolves, stray dogs, and other animals roamed freely after dark. Travelers caught outside the gates overnight slept in fields or forests, wrapped in cloaks, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Many preferred to time their journeys carefully, reaching a city well before sunset rather than risk the night. Inside the walls, families gathered early. Supper was eaten while some daylight still lingered. Bread, stew, and simple foods were shared quietly. Children were guided toward beds stuffed with straw or feathers. Adults prepared for sleep not because they were tired, but because there was little else to do. Sleep itself was different then. It came earlier, shaped by the sun rather than clocks. Many people experienced what historians now call segmented sleep, resting for a few hours, waking briefly in the deep of night, then sleeping again until dawn. But even those brief waking moments happened indoors, by faint firelight or none at all. The city, as a whole, seemed to hold its breath. Guards took their places along walls and gates, carrying lanterns that cast small islands of light into the darkness. Their footsteps were slow and steady, a reassuring rhythm for those lying awake inside their homes. These watchmen were among the few officially allowed to move through the streets at night, and even they walked carefully, listening as much as looking. From time to time, a sound broke the silence. A distant cough, the creak of a shutter in the wind, the soft toll of a bell marking the hours. These noises felt louder at night, magnified by stillness. Each sound reminded people that the world had not disappeared, only retreated into shadow. The silence of medieval cities was not accidental. It was learned behavior, passed down through generations who understood that survival depended on respecting the night. Darkness was not to be challenged or conquered. It was to be endured. As the city slept, the sky above it filled with stars, brighter than anything modern eyes usually see. With no artificial glow to compete, the heavens spread wide and deep, a quiet companion to the resting world below. Monks in monasteries rose for night prayers, their chants drifting softly through cloisters, barely touching the streets beyond. And so, wrapped in darkness and caution, medieval cities rested until the faintest hint of dawn returned. The silence was not emptiness. It was protection. It was habit. It was the sound of a world that knew the value of stopping. And as you settle into this quiet moment, let the shadows grow softer, the sounds fewer, and the city fade gently into sleep. The fear that walked with the night. As the darkness deepened, fear did not arrive suddenly. It settled slowly, like mist drifting through the streets. Medieval people did not speak loudly about this fear, but they lived with it every evening. The night was not just a time without light, it was a time when the usual rules of safety felt weaker, and the unseen felt closer. In daylight, a medieval city was familiar. Faces were known. Movements were predictable. Everyone could see who belonged and who did not. But after sunset, that certainty dissolved. A hooded figure at night could be a neighbor, or a stranger with harmful intent. Without clear vision, trust became fragile. Stories fed this unease. Tales of thieves, murderers, and wandering outlaws passed quietly from household to household. Parents warned children not to look out of windows at night. Adults spoke in low voices about attacks that had happened after dark, always vague, always unsettling. The night, in these stories, was not dramatic, it was simply unsafe. Law and order also slept more lightly at night. City courts did not operate after sunset. Officials were at home. If something went wrong, help might be far away or slow to arrive. This made darkness a shield for wrongdoing. Even honest people feared being mistaken for criminals if they were seen moving about at night. Because of this, cities created strict rules. Curfews were common. Anyone found outside after the bell rang could be questioned, fined, or even imprisoned. Carrying a weapon at night was often forbidden unless you were a guard. These laws were not about control alone, they were about preventing panic. Fire, again, loomed in everyone's thoughts. At night, people were asleep or half asleep. A fire could grow unnoticed until it was too late. The silence of the city made this danger more frightening. That is why watchmen were trained to listen for crackling sounds, for the smell of smoke, for any sign of danger hiding in the dark. The fear of night was not always rational, but it was deeply human. Darkness magnified imagination. Shadows looked like figures. Wind through narrow alleys sounded like footsteps. A simple noise could raise a racing heartbeat. Superstition filled the gaps where knowledge ended. Many believed spirits, demons, or restless souls moved more freely at night. Certain hours were thought to be especially dangerous, the deep middle of the night, when even guards felt isolated. These beliefs encouraged people to stay inside, to pray, to sleep. Yet the fear also brought comfort in a strange way. Inside their homes, families felt closer. Walls, doors, and shared space created a small island of safety. The city might be silent, but it was not lonely. It was full of people resting, trusting that morning would return. As the hours passed, the city learned to exist without movement. Silence became normal. Fear became manageable. And somewhere beneath it all, the rhythm of night continued, slow and steady, carrying everyone toward dawn. Gates, walls, and the art of closing the city. As night took full control of the sky, medieval cities performed a ritual as old as the stones themselves. They closed. Not just doors. A city after sunset was no longer a place to pass through, it was a sealed shelter, carefully locked against the dark. City gates were the first and most important to shut. These gates were massive structures of wood reinforced with iron, set into thick stone walls. As evening approached, guards prepared them with calm precision. Chains were pulled. Bolts were slid into place. Heavy beams were lowered. The sound of a gate closing echoed through the streets like a final warning. If you were not inside by now, you would not be welcomed until morning. For travelers, this moment was decisive. Many hurried toward cities in the late afternoon, judging the distance carefully so they would not be stranded outside. Being locked out meant spending the night in the open, exposed to weather, animals, and human threats. Some slept near the walls, hoping for protection. Others sought refuge in monasteries or roadside inns if they were lucky enough to find them before darkness fell. Inside the walls, the city transformed. Streets that were once busy became narrow corridors of shadow. Shops closed with wooden shutters pulled tight. Iron bars were placed across doors. Even wealthy homes, with courtyards and guards, reduced their activity to a minimum. Walls were more than military defenses at night. They were psychological ones. Knowing the city was enclosed brought a sense of order. The outside world, with its unknown dangers, was kept at a distance. Inside, everyone shared the same rule: stay still, stay quiet, stay safe. Watchmen patrolled along the walls and main streets, lanterns swinging gently in their hands. The light they carried was not meant to banish darkness, only to push it back just enough. Their footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing softly on stone. If they called out the hour, their voices carried far in the silence, a reminder that someone was awake and watching. These patrols followed strict routes. Certain areas were checked more often, near markets, warehouses, and densely packed neighborhoods where fire risk was high. Other alleys remained almost completely dark, avoided unless necessary. Even guards respected the power of darkness. Inside homes, people listened. The closing of gates, the muffled sounds of guards, the distant clank of metal, all of these were familiar night sounds. They signaled safety. Once the city was closed, the night felt more predictable. This habit of closing the city shaped medieval thinking. Life was divided clearly, inside and outside, day and night, safety and danger. The silence that followed was not emptiness, but containment. Everything was where it should be. And so, with gates locked and walls standing firm, the medieval city settled deeper into its quiet, holding the darkness at bay until morning light could return. The quiet of homes and the rhythm of night. With the gates secured and the streets emptied, the city's life shifted inward. Homes, small shops that doubled as living spaces, and courtyards became islands of activity, or, more often, islands of stillness. The rhythm of night was personal now, experienced in the flickering shadows of candlelight, the crackle of a hearth, and the hushed murmurs of those gathered under one roof. Families gathered around simple meals, often eaten quickly before exhaustion overtook them. Bread, porridge, stew. Plain, hearty sustenance designed to fortify bodies for sleep rather than delight palates. In wealthier homes, candles flickered in sconces, illuminating wooden beams and tapestries. In poorer dwellings, the only light might be a tiny tallow candle or the last glowing embers of a fire. Darkness pressed against the walls, reminding everyone that the outside world was still a place of unknowns. Children were guided to straw-stuffed mattresses or feather beds, swaddled and tucked in carefully. Night terrors, whispers of wandering spirits, and the stories parents repeated softly served as both warnings and lullabies. Sleep was essential, not only for rest, but for survival. Being alert at night was dangerous, being asleep safely inside was protection. Even the soundscape inside homes was subdued. Conversations were quiet, punctuated by the crackle of the fire. The occasional clink of a spoon against a bowl or the rustle of bedding was enough to make a child's eyes widen in the dim glow. People moved slowly, deliberately, respecting the night and the fragility of their safety. Some houses contained small altars or devotional spaces. Evening prayers were a ritual way to mark the transition from day to night. The soft, repetitive murmurs of families reciting psalms, blessings, or meditations offered comfort against the pressing silence outside. These prayers were not only spiritual, they were psychological, a shield against the unease that darkness naturally brings. The night was not uniform for all. In wealthier neighborhoods, the quiet could be almost complete, broken only by the sound of a distant guard or an occasional carriage returning from the city gate. In poorer quarters, the sounds of restless children, coughing elders, and occasional arguments added texture to the silence. Yet even here, noise was measured. The risk of attracting attention or misfortune made loudness dangerous. Sleep itself followed the natural rhythm of darkness. Most people slept early, sometimes even before midnight, and woke with the first hints of dawn. Scholars note that segmented sleep was common, 2 periods of rest separated by an hour or 2 of quiet wakefulness. During this time, people might pray, talk softly, tend a fire, or simply lie awake listening to the city breathe in its sleep. Outside, the streets remained empty and silent. The city's stillness was nearly absolute, broken only by the occasional patrolling guard or the distant bark of a dog. Night terrors, whispers of wandering spirits, and the stories parents repeated softly served as both warnings and lullabies. Sleep was essential, not only for rest, but for survival. Being alert at night was dangerous, being asleep safely inside was protection. Even the soundscape inside homes was subdued. Conversations were quiet, punctuated by the crackle of the fire. The occasional clink of a spoon against a bowl or the rustle of bedding was enough to make a child's eyes widen in the dim glow. People moved slowly, deliberately, respecting the night and the fragility of their safety. Some houses contained small altars or devotional spaces. Evening prayers were a ritual way to mark the transition from day to night. The soft, repetitive murmurs of families reciting psalms, blessings, or meditations offered comfort against the pressing silence outside. These prayers were not only spiritual, they were psychological, a shield against the unease that darkness naturally brings. The night was not uniform for all. In wealthier neighborhoods, the quiet could be almost complete, broken only by the sound of a distant guard or an occasional carriage returning from the city gate. In poorer quarters, the sounds of restless children, coughing elders, and occasional arguments added texture to the silence. Yet even here, noise was measured. The risk of attracting attention or misfortune made loudness dangerous. Sleep itself followed the natural rhythm of darkness. Most people slept early, sometimes even before midnight, and woke with the first hints of dawn. Scholars note that segmented sleep was common, two periods of rest separated by an hour or two of quiet wakefulness. During this time, people might pray, talk softly, tend a fire, or simply lie awake listening to the city breathe in its sleep. Outside, the streets remained empty and silent. The city's stillness was nearly absolute, broken only by the occasional patrolling guard or the distant bark of a dog. This quiet was both practical and cultural. It reinforced caution, reduced risk of fire or crime, and created a shared sense of order among the inhabitants. And so, the medieval night passed, not in emptiness, but in measured, careful presence. Every flicker of light, every creak of timber, every whispered prayer contributed to a city that was alive in its quiet, pulsing slowly until dawn would signal a return to movement, trade, and noise. Night beyond the city walls. While the city slept behind its gates, the world outside was a very different place. Beyond the thick stone walls, darkness ruled with few constraints. Forests, fields, and open roads became unpredictable spaces, alive with sounds and movements that were often frightening to anyone caught in them. For those traveling or living outside city limits, night was a test of courage, and sometimes of survival. The road to the next town or village could be treacherous. Without streetlights, travelers relied on the moon and stars, if the sky was clear, to guide their steps. Wolves, foxes, and stray dogs prowled the edges of forests and fields, drawn by the scent of humans or livestock. Stories of wild animals attacking travelers were common, shared in hushed tones around hearths to warn the next generation. But animals were not the only threat. Human danger lurked in the shadows. Highwaymen and thieves often chose darkness as their ally, lying in wait along poorly traveled roads or near crossroads. A traveler caught alone could be robbed, threatened, or worse. Inns were scarce outside major cities, and those that existed were sometimes no safer than sleeping in a barn or the open field. Travelers learned to plan their journeys carefully, aiming to reach a safe gate or walled town well before nightfall. Even small villages followed a similar rhythm to the cities. Houses were clustered together, and fires were carefully tended. Dogs barked to alert households of intruders, and families slept with weapons nearby, a simple club, a pitchfork, or a sword if they could afford one. Night was respected, and wandering freely was considered reckless, even foolish. Superstition heightened the danger. People believed that spirits, demons, or other malevolent forces were most active during the night. Certain hours, around midnight or the so-called witching hour, were thought especially risky. Travelers might carry charms, crosses, or holy water, relying on faith as a layer of protection against the unknown. Trade routes were equally affected. Merchants rarely moved goods after sunset. Wagons creaked along the roads in daylight, but at night, the movement of valuable cargo was nearly impossible. This meant that commerce paused, just like life in the city. The rhythm of night imposed its own order on society, creating periods of rest and enforced caution. Despite these dangers, the night outside the walls held its own strange beauty. The stars shone brighter than they do in modern cities, undimmed by artificial light. The sound of wind through trees, the call of an owl, or the distant howl of a wolf created a living symphony, reminding travelers that the world continued, even when people retreated to their homes. For the medieval city's inhabitants, this awareness reinforced the importance of gates and walls. Inside the city, they could sleep with confidence, knowing that the dangers beyond were kept at bay. Outside, life was uncertain, measured by the pace of one's steps, the vigilance of one's eyes, and the trust in both skill and luck. And so, night stretched across the landscape, silent and careful within the city, wild and unpredictable beyond it, teaching everyone the same lesson: darkness was not merely a backdrop for sleep, it was a force to respect. Guards, watchmen, and the rhythm of vigilance. Even as families slept behind their doors, the city never entirely surrendered to darkness. Guards and watchmen kept a slow, steady pulse of life alive in the night. Their presence ensured that silence was not just emptiness, it was protection, a carefully maintained boundary between safety and danger. Medieval watchmen had a defined role, and their work was demanding. Patrolling walls, gates, and main streets, they carried lanterns or torches that cast small islands of light into the shadows. Every step was deliberate, every sound noted. The creak of a shutter, the rustle of straw, the faint call of a night animal, all could indicate a threat. Their senses were trained to pick up the faintest irregularity. In larger towns, guards took turns at posts along the walls, moving in shifts to ensure no section was left unattended. Some carried whistles or bells to signal alarms, while others relied on horns or shouted calls to communicate across distances. The rhythm of these patrols created a predictable, yet comforting, background for those inside the city. While the streets were empty, someone was awake, listening, watching, ensuring the city could rest safely. The tools of the trade were simple but effective. Lanterns protected their light from wind, allowing guards to see in the narrow alleys. Wooden staffs, swords, or halberds gave them authority and the means to respond to threats. Some towns even had small towers where guards could watch over gates and key streets, their elevated vantage points giving them sight beyond the reach of shadows. But being a watchman was more than just duty, it required understanding the night itself. Silence was a tool. Noise could draw attention, while too much caution could make danger go unnoticed. Experienced guards knew when to speak softly, when to strike a bell, and when to wait and observe. Every night was a lesson in patience and attention, in the delicate balance between action and inaction. For those inside, the sound of a guard's footstep on cobblestone, the faint jingle of keys, or the distant toll of a bell offered reassurance. It reminded the city's inhabitants that the night, while dangerous outside, was under control within. Families slept more peacefully knowing that someone was awake, and that their safety rested not only on walls and gates, but on vigilance maintained by careful, disciplined individuals. The presence of guards also reinforced rules. Curfew bells had rung, gates were closed, and the streets emptied, but knowing watchmen patrolled reassured the community that order persisted. The city's silence was not just cultural. It was enforced, protected, and respected by those whose duty it was to keep the night from becoming chaotic. And so, even as darkness stretched across streets and alleys, the medieval city continued to breathe slowly. The patrolling steps of watchmen, the faint glow of lanterns, and the quiet hum of responsibility created a rhythm that defined the night. Life may have paused, but it did not vanish. The city slept, yes, but under the careful eye of those who never did. The sounds, smells, and whispers of night. Even in silence, a medieval city at night was alive in subtle ways. The quiet was not empty, it was full of soft, almost imperceptible sounds that gave life to the sleeping streets. For those who listened closely, the city spoke in whispers, sighs, and faint movements. The first of these sounds came from the hearths. In nearly every home, fires glowed low, crackling softly as logs settled into embers. The warmth from these tiny flames was comforting, but it also added to the rhythm of the night, a gentle, persistent murmur that reminded families that life continued, quietly, behind closed doors. The scent of burning wood or tallow candles mixed with the faint aroma of food left from the evening meal. Warm bread, roasted meat, or the lingering tang of herbs. Occasionally, the silence was punctuated by the wind moving through narrow alleys. It whistled between timbered houses, rattled shutters, and caused doors to creak. These sounds, amplified by darkness, could startle even the most accustomed ear. But in time, the city's inhabitants learned to read these noises, to distinguish between harmless disturbances and possible threats. Animals also left their marks. Cats prowled the shadows, hunting mice in storage rooms or barns. Dogs, sometimes tied outside, barked occasionally, alerting both owners and neighbors to movement. The soft hoot of an owl or the distant howl of a wolf reminded the city's dwellers that the world beyond the walls remained wild and unpredictable. Even people moving indoors contributed to the city's quiet symphony. A child shifting in bed, a mother quietly tending a fire, or a guard pacing his post. Each sound was measured, subdued, and deliberate. The echo of footsteps on cobblestone or wooden floors reminded residents that life had not vanished, only slowed, reduced to essentials. In larger homes or monasteries, night was marked by whispers and low chants. Monks and nuns might rise briefly for prayer, their voices soft but steady, carrying faintly through stone corridors. Such sounds were like threads connecting the sleeping city, small but persistent, reminding all that life and ritual persisted even in darkness. The smells of the night were equally telling. Smoke from hearths mingled with the earthy scent of stone streets dampened by evening dew. Herbs stored in kitchens or hung from rafters released subtle fragrances into the air. These sensory cues became part of the city's nightly pattern, comforting and grounding those within, while subtly warning of the world outside. In this way, silence was not emptiness. It was a tapestry woven from tiny details, soft crackles, faint footsteps, whispers, the hiss of wind, the scent of smoke, and the occasional distant bell. It was a living, breathing night, where vigilance, habit, and ritual coexisted with the deep calm of sleep. And as the hours passed, the city settled into a meditative rhythm. The streets lay empty, walls stood firm, fires glowed, and watchmen moved like quiet sentinels. Life was contained, restrained, and yet fully present in every sound, every smell, every small motion. The city had surrendered to night, but it had done so with awareness, discipline, and care. The slow return of dawn. As the night wore on, the medieval city remained mostly still, but the first hints of change began long before the sun appeared. Dawn crept in softly, painting the sky in muted shades of gray, pink, and gold. The city, which had seemed frozen in shadow, started to stir in quiet anticipation of a new day. Inside homes, sleepers shifted on straw mattresses or feather beds. Some woke naturally with the dim light, stretching and adjusting, while others lingered in the heavy calm of pre-dawn darkness. Fires were gently stoked, and the scent of brewing porridge or fresh bread began to drift through kitchens. Candles, if lit at all, were small and soft, conserving precious wax for the brighter moments ahead. Outside, birds were the first heralds of morning. Their cautious calls echoed across the rooftops and narrow streets, announcing the end of night's quiet dominion. The soft rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of a river or fountain signaled the reawakening of the natural world beyond the city walls. Even the wind seemed gentler, shifting from the chilling hush of night to a lighter, warmer presence that hinted at the coming day. Street life slowly returned as the city's gates were prepared to open. Guards, still vigilant, began their routines for the morning shift, unlocking gates, checking locks, and signaling each other with soft calls. Merchants stirred in their homes and workshops, arranging goods, sweeping streets, and preparing for the first customers. The quiet symphony of the night transformed into the bustling hum of activity. For those who had spent the night in fear of darkness, the dawn brought relief. The threats of crime, fire, and wandering beasts receded with the sun. Yet the lessons of the night remained. Medieval people understood that their survival depended on respecting darkness, honoring the rhythm of sleep, and carefully controlling the city until it was safe to emerge. The contrast between night and day was stark. One moment, silence, shadows, and watchful caution; the next, light, movement, and the lively chatter of daily life. This rhythm defined medieval life, structured not by clocks, but by the natural rise and fall of the sun. It dictated work, rest, safety, and the collective heartbeat of the city itself. As the streets brightened, the city seemed to exhale once again, leaving behind the tension and stillness of the night. But those who had lived through the hours of darkness carried its lessons quietly with them, the knowledge of vigilance, the appreciation of calm, and the deep, almost meditative understanding that night, while dangerous, was a necessary and natural part of life. In this way, medieval cities existed in two worlds, one of measured, careful night, and one of energetic, bustling day. Each rhythm was essential, and together they created a cycle that shaped human life for centuries. And even now, If you close your eyes and imagine it, the quiet of the medieval night can still be felt, a world of shadows, whispers, and soft, deliberate breathing. Nightly rituals and quiet habits. Even as darkness reigned over the medieval city, life did not completely disappear, it shifted into subtler, quieter forms. Families, merchants, and even solitary individuals engaged in small, deliberate rituals that shaped the rhythm of the night. These habits, often unnoticed in the bustle of day, were essential to survival and comfort, and they gave the sleeping city a gentle pulse. In homes, simple tasks continued under dim candlelight or the warm glow of a hearth. People mended clothes, prepared tools for the next day, or arranged food and supplies. A mother might gently rock a child, singing softly to soothe them, while a father checked the locks and ensured the fire burned safely. These moments were slow and meditative, creating a sense of purpose amid darkness. Monks and nuns, meanwhile, followed nocturnal prayers in monasteries. Their chants, low and rhythmic, echoed through stone corridors, sometimes spilling faintly into nearby streets. Even distant residents could sense the solemnity of these sounds. They provided reassurance that the world, though asleep, was still watched and tended with care. Some towns maintained small taverns or inns that operated at night, though they were rare and discreet. Patrons spoke in hushed tones, mindful of the rules and risks outside. Here, travelers might share news, gossip, or stories of distant lands, their voices blending with the occasional clink of cups or the murmur of the fire. These nocturnal pockets of life were exceptions, quiet, contained, and respectful of the city's overall stillness. Animals played a subtle role in the night as well. Cats hunted mice in barns and kitchens, their silent movements adding texture to the darkness. Dogs, tied or kept within yards, patrolled instinctively, alerting families to disturbances with a low bark or growl. Even birds, roosting quietly, added faint sounds that broke absolute silence. The city was asleep, but not empty. Every sound, smell, and movement contributed to the living rhythm of night. Beyond practical routines, superstition and caution guided behaviors. People avoided walking alone, lit small charms or crosses for protection, and whispered prayers before venturing outside, even briefly. Darkness was respected, it was a force to be observed, not challenged. These customs became habits, passed down through generations, reinforcing the quiet, cautious order of nighttime life. And so, the medieval night was neither idle nor lifeless. It was deliberate, slow, and measured, a period where every flicker of light, every faint sound, every cautious movement mattered. While the city slept, it remained alive in the smallest details. A tapestry of vigilance, ritual, and quiet human presence, waiting patiently for dawn to bring life and motion back to its streets. The peaceful rhythm of medieval night, a gentle conclusion. As the night gradually surrendered to the first light of dawn, the medieval city completed its quiet journey. The hours of darkness had passed with measured care, guided by gates, watchmen, rituals, and the subtle sounds of life that persisted even in sleep. What seemed at first like emptiness was, in truth, a world alive with patience, discipline, and attentive presence. The city's silence had served many purposes. It protected its inhabitants from crime and fire, allowed families to rest safely, and gave the natural world space to exist alongside human life. Darkness was not an enemy, it was a companion, a teacher, and a guide. Every shutter closed, every fire tended, every step of a patrolling guard, and every whispered prayer contributed to a living rhythm that the city followed night after night. As dawn broke fully, the streets came alive again. Merchants opened stalls, children ran along cobblestones, and animals moved freely. The city seemed to exhale, leaving behind the tension of night and embracing the energy of day. But the memory of the night lingered. A quiet, almost meditative imprint that shaped the way people lived, worked, and rested. For us today, imagining a medieval night offers more than history, it offers a moment of calm, a chance to feel what life was like in a world ruled by natural rhythms rather than artificial lights. The stillness, the measured sounds, the careful habits of vigilance and rest, all invite us to slow down, breathe, and experience the meditative quality of life in a city that learned to sleep wisely. So, as we leave the city at dawn, we carry with us the lessons of the night. That quiet is powerful, that darkness can be a sanctuary, and that even in stillness, life continues in ways both subtle and profound. The streets may now be bustling, but if you close your eyes and listen, you can still feel the heartbeat of the sleeping medieval city, a world where silence was not emptiness, but life itself, measured in whispers, flickers of light, and the gentle rhythm of human care. And with that, the night ends, leaving behind the calm legacy of a city that knew how to rest, and in resting, survive.